Long ago, before the world was divided into kingdoms, before temples rose, and before palaces gleamed, the Korean peninsula was covered in thick forests, rivers, running silver beneath the mountains, and the air filled with the smoke of small hearth fires. This is where the tale of Dangun begins, the legendary founder of the first Korean kingdom, Goguryeo. The story whispers that a heavenly prince descended from the skies. His name was Hwanong, son of the heavenly god Hwanun. With him, he carried not only authority, but compassion, a desire to live among humankind. He descended to Mount Baekje, and there, surrounded by sacred winds, he began to govern the earth. It is said that animals came to him, longing to become human. Among them, a bear and a tiger prayed for this transformation. The god gave them a trial: to stay in a dark cave for 100 days, eating nothing but garlic and mugwort, simple herbs that carried the essence of earth's purity. The tiger, restless, abandoned the trial, but the bear endured. And from the patient bear emerged a woman, strong and humble. She became known as Unyunyo, the bear woman. Unyunyo longed for a child, and Wanang, moved by her prayers, took her as his companion. From their union was born Dangun Wangyeom. He grew and founded Goguryeo, the very first kingdom of Korea. Said to be in the year 2333 BCE, whether fact or legend. The tale of Dangun continues to echo, not just as a story, but as a spiritual root of Korean identity and origin, wrapped in patience, endurance, and the merging of heaven and earth. As centuries flowed, the people of this early land tilled fields, raised millet and rice, and shaped the stones of dolmen's massive tombs, great slabs balanced like tables in the quiet earth. These dolmens still dot the landscape today, silent witnesses to those early generations. Their exact meaning has long faded, yet they stand like monuments of mystery, older than the pyramids, whispering of rituals and reverence for ancestors. The peninsula became a crossroads, brushed by influences from distant China, touched by the ebb and flow of migrating tribes. Yet it remained distinctly its own, its valleys holding languages, myths, and customs that blossomed with unique resilience. Shamanism guided early life. Villagers believed in spirits dwelling in mountains and rivers, each hill alive with unseen presences. Shamans, often women, served as bridges between the world of the living and the unseen. Draped in bright robes, beating drums that echoed like heartbeats across the valleys. Their rituals carried hopes for harvests, for rain, for the health of children. In those moments, firelight flickered, voices chanted, and the boundary between earth and sky felt thin, fragile, and holy. Metals arrived, a bronze gleam of daggers, the iron shine of blades. Tools changed, art changed, lives deepened. Society grew more complex. Villages becoming chiefdoms, chiefdoms pressing outward into early states. And though records are scarce, scattered fragments tell us of kings and rulers emerging, of customs being written, of a people shaping their destiny. One fragment comes from Chinese records, where ancient scribes wrote of a place called Hosang, the land of mourning, calm. It is an image that endures, for Korea has long been imagined as a place of serene dawns. The first light of the rising sun touching its mountains before anywhere else. To this day, the phrase carries a hush, as though history itself remembers those early mornings. But behind that calm lay strength. Goguryeo expanded, trading, fortifying, building codes of law. In the 4th century BCE, the king known as Baekje is remembered for bringing Chinese-style governance. Though scholars debate his true role, what mattered most was the blending local traditions with outside knowledge, forming a society that was not simply borrowed, but uniquely Korean. And yet, as with all stories, change came with conflict. Powerful neighbors stirred. The Han dynasty of China reached toward the peninsula, pressing with armies, seeking dominance. Goguryeo weakened under the strain. By 108 BCE, its capital had fallen to Han forces, and Chinese commanderies were established in the north. But even this did not erase the spirit of the land. Instead, tribes in the mountains and valleys waited, reshaping themselves, preparing for new kingdoms to rise. The whisper of 3 powers grew louder, stirring like embers in the ash Goguryeo in the north, Baekje in the southwest, Silla in the southeast. Soon their banners would wave, their armies march. Their scholars and monks spread learning, and the Korean identity would enter a new and dazzling era. The candle burns low, the parchment pages of history slowly turning, their ink still warm with myth and memory. You have drifted with me through the mists of Korea's legendary beginnings, through the cave of the bear, through the fields of early farmers, past the stone dolmens that watch the horizon. Ahead lies the age of kingdoms, of splendor and war, of temples and murals that still gleam in dim light. But for now, breathe softly and let the past settle gently into your imagination. In the rugged north, where the mountains pressed against the sky, there grew the kingdom of Goguryeo. Strong, fierce, and expansive. It was founded in 37 BCE by King Dangun, also known as Jumangya, name sung in legend, for he was said to be born of divine lineage. Goguryeo's people were warriors of resilience, building fortresses upon the cliffs. Their arrows swift, their horses sure-footed, murals painted upon tomb walls, survive, even now, their pigments, whispering of banquets, hunts, and heavenly beings, alive with the vigor of their age. To the southwest stretched Baekje, born slightly later. In 18 BCE, Baekje was graceful and refined, a kingdom of artistry and diplomacy. Nestled near the fertile plains, its people mastered craftsmanship, sending envoys and ideas across the seas to Japan. They carried with them the elegance of their culture, introducing Buddhism and writing, sowing seeds that would blossom far beyond their borders. And in the southeast, protected by natural ridges, rose Silla, founded in 57 BCE. At first, it was the weakest of the three, small and modest, yet within its heart burned ambition and endurance. Its leaders drew upon loyalty and discipline, weaving together a warrior brotherhood called the Wa-Rong. These young men, adorned with flowing hair and guided by codes of honor, trained not only in battle, but in poetry, in song, in devotion to the beauty of life itself. The Korean peninsula became a canvas painted by these three kingdoms, each stroke bold and distinct, yet overlapping in rivalry and exchange. Their histories were entwined, a dance of power and culture across centuries. The arrival of Buddhism in the 4th century transformed the kingdoms. From the west, monks journeyed with sutras, bells, and the gentle rhythm of chants. Temples rose in valleys where once only shaman drums had sounded. In Goguryeo, Buddhism became a pillar of the state, inspiring great monasteries carved into cliffsides and art that breathed serenity into stone. Baekje embraced it with luminous grace, building temples like jeweled crowns upon its landscape. And in Silla, though slow to adopt at first, Buddhism eventually flourished, shaping an identity that would guide it to greatness. Yet, even as enlightenment spread, swords still clashed. Goguryeo stood like a fortress against Chinese dynasties, resisting wave after wave of invasion. Its generals were famed for their cunning, its warriors for their resilience. The capital, Pyongyang, gleamed as a city of strength, walls encircling life like a clasped hand. Baekje, though smaller, became a bridge between cultures. Its artisans created statues of bronze and gold, their faces serene, their robes flowing as though in gentle motion. Ships from Baekje sailed across waters, carrying these treasures to Japan, shaping the spiritual and artistic identity of another nation. Few today know how deeply Baekje's gifts traveled, yet their legacy still lingers quietly in shrines across the sea. Silla, patient and calculating, watched and endured. It forged alliances when it could, learned from others, and nurtured a spirit of unity. Within its borders, The Hwarang warriors sang verses of loyalty not only to their lords, but to their homeland itself. This was not just training for war, but a cultivation of character, a belief that one could serve with both strength and beauty. The rivalry of the three kingdoms was fierce, and centuries stretched with battles echoing through the mountains. But slowly, tides shifted. Silla, once the smallest, aligned itself with the Tang dynasty of China, a powerful ally whose armies and resources tipped the scales. Goguryeo and Baekje, though proud and strong, could not hold forever. By the mid-7th century, the peninsula was transformed. Baekje fell in 660, its royal family fleeing across the seas to Japan. Its golden culture scattered like leaves upon the wind. Goguryeo resisted longer, its fortresses defiant. But in 668, it too fell, its mighty legacy slipping into memory. Silla, triumphant, now stood as the unifier. Yet it was not absolute. The northern lands that once belonged to Goguryeo became part of a new kingdom called Baekje, founded by refugees and former generals. Thus, the peninsula was shaped into two powers: unified Silla in the south, Baekje in the north. And so the three kingdoms gave way to two, yet their echoes lingered in art, in belief, in the very spirit of the people. Goguryeo's murals still pulse with life. Back statues still gleam with delicate serenity, and Silla's poems still whisper of loyalty and beauty. Each kingdom had left its brushstroke upon the canvas, their hues forever woven into Korea's story. Night deepens around us as we imagine the flickering light of temple lanterns, the sound of distant monks chanting in mountain halls, the steady beat of warring drums fading into memory. The kingdoms have risen, clashed, and fallen, and the peninsula now turns toward a golden age of unity, where temples would soar higher and culture would bloom like a garden in eternal spring. Imagine now the capital of a unified Silla, a city that sparkled like a crown. By the 8th century, it was among the greatest cities of the world, sometimes called the city of 1,000 golden roofs. At dawn, temple bells echoed across valleys, their tones soft and resonant, rippling like water over a stone. The streets bustled with scholars, monks, traders, and artisans, each corner alive with the hum of life. Lanterns glowed by night, while palaces rose by day, their tiled roofs arching like wings. Buddhism had fully blossomed, and with it, art and architecture reached new heights. The temple Bulgaksa, built of stone and wood, seemed to hover between the earthly and the divine. Carved staircases symbolized the journey from the human world to nirvana. Not far away, hidden within a hillside, lay the Seogurum grottoa, chamber where a serene Buddha sits in perfect stillness, surrounded by bodhisattvas and guardians, the stone walls breathing quiet eternity. To stand within that grotto, as pilgrims once did, was to feel time dissolve, the air thick with reverence. Even today, these treasures of Silla remain, their presence a hymn carved in stone. But unity was never simple. The Silla court grew proud and hierarchical. Aristocrats, dressed in silk, rode in carriages, while peasants labored in fields, paying heavy taxes. Yet the brilliance of Silla's cultural flowering cannot be denied. Metal workers crafted crowns of gold, delicate as filigree, glittering with jade and glass beads. Poets and musicians sang verses that merged elegance with devotion, their words floating like incense smoke. Curiously, Silla's influence spread far beyond its borders. Envoys traveled to the Tang court in China, bearing tribute, exchanging ideas. Merchants carried goods across seas to Japan, linking the peninsula into a wider web of trade. Gyeongju became a cosmopolitan center where foreign visitors marveled at the city's wealth and refinement. And yet, while Silla thrived in the south, Baekje rose in the north. Founded by Daejoyang in 698, born from the remnants of Goguryeo, Baekje carried the spirit of its warrior ancestors. Its lands stretched wide across Manchuria into parts of today's Russia, its forests vast and rivers strong. Baekje is sometimes called the prosperous country in the East, a realm of both power and culture. Chinese records speak of its refined cities, its scholars versed in Confucian classics, its rulers commanding armies that defended their territory with skill. Yet Baekje's story is often less remembered, its ruins lying in lands beyond Korea's modern borders. Still, it left a profound mark, a legacy of resilience, of survival after collapse, of carrying forward the light of Goguryeo even in exile. By the late 9th century, cracks began to show. Unified Silla, though once dazzling, grew strained. Aristocrats fought among themselves, peasants rose in rebellion, and provincial warlords gained power. The court in Jeongju could no longer command the obedience of distant regions. Slowly, the dream of unity frayed. By the year 935, Silla surrendered, handing over its crown to a new dynasty. Goguryeo, Baekje II, had fallen earlier. Conquered by the Khitan Liao dynasty in 926, its people scattered, some fleeing south to join Goguryeo, others fading into the forests of history. The peninsula, fractured yet again, now found itself under the banner of a fresh kingdom, one that would give its very name to Korea. The Goguryeo dynasty, founded by King Taizhou, began in 918. Its capital, Gaizhong, modern-day Kaesong, became the new heart of the land. Taizhou was a unifier, a leader who sought to weave together the remnants of Silla, Goguryeo, and Baekje into one fabric. He offered amnesty to rival leaders, embraced Buddhism as a state faith, and fostered stability after centuries of upheaval. The name Goguryeo itself derived from Goguryeo, a deliberate echo of the mighty northern kingdom. It is from this name that the world would later know the land as Korea. In those years, the land settled into a rhythm, a new dynasty laying its foundations with both strength and grace. Imagine the artistry of Goguryeo golden age, the deep jade green of Celadon pottery, glazed so finely it seemed as though moonlight had pooled within each vessel. Dragons curled around vases, cranes stretched their wings across bowls, lotuses unfurled on cups. These works became prized across the world, sought after in China, admired in far-off courts. To hold one was to hold a fragment of Korea's soul. But perhaps even more extraordinary was the creation of the Tripitaka Koreana. In the 13th century, amid the looming threat of Mongol invasions, monks carved the entirety of Buddhist scriptures onto more than 80,000 wooden blocks. Each character precise, each stroke a prayer. Imagine the steady hands, the soft tap of chisels, the smell of ink and pine, the devotion that pressed each word into wood. Stored safely at Heinze Temple, these blocks remain intact even today, one of the most complete collections of Buddhist texts in the world. And still, beyond monasteries and workshops, the dynasty endured struggles. Powerful clans vied for influence, peasants bore heavy burdens, and foreign empires cast their gaze upon Goguryeo. The Khitan attacked, the Jurchens pressed from the north, and at last, the Mongols descended like a storm, their horsemen swift as shadows. For decades, Goguryeo bent beneath Mongol power, its kings intermarrying with Mongol princesses, its people resisting quietly in forests and mountains. Yet through it all, Goguryeo endured. Like iron hammered into steel, its identity grew stronger, shaped by both hardship and beauty. Its monks still prayed, its artisans still created, its farmers still sowed and reaped. And when the Mongols faded, Goguryeo remained scarred but unbroken, holding firm to the pulse of the peninsula. The candle in our imagined chamber burns lower now, its wax pooling quietly. We have drifted through unified Silla's golden temples, through Baekje's northern forests, and into Goguryeo green-glazed beauty. Ahead lies a new dawn, when a dynasty even longer than Goguryeo will rise, the Joseon dynasty, where kings will build palaces, scholars will write laws, and one great ruler will gift his people their own alphabet. But let us pause here, floating softly in Goguryeo twilight, before turning to that next page. In the year 1392, a general named Yi Suangai rose to power. Once a commander of Goguryeo armies, he turned against the faltering dynasty and founded a new one, Hosang. From that moment, a new age dawned. Its philosophy guided not by Buddhism as before, but by Neo-Confucianism. This shift reshaped society, weaving order, hierarchy, and scholarship into the very fabric of daily life. Hosang's capital was moved to Hanyang, known today as Seoul. Nestled among mountains and rivers, the city was carefully designed in harmony with geomantic principles. Palaces were constructed, their sweeping tiled roofs arching like wings of birds in flight. Courtyards opening into gardens where plum blossoms fell like drifting snow. Within these halls, kings and scholars deliberated, their words shaping laws and codes that would govern generations. Confucian ideals emphasized loyalty, filial piety, and harmony. Society became structured, with scholars at the top, peasants sustaining the land, artisans and merchants below, and slaves at the bottom. Exams determined rank, and the study of the Confucian classics was revered as a noble pursuit. It was an age of ritual, of order, of careful balance between heaven and earth. Yet, within this world of rules and ranks, brilliance also bloomed. The early Hosang period is remembered as a golden age of progress, especially under the reign of one King Sejong the Great. Ascending the throne in 1418, he became one of Korea's most beloved rulers. Not through conquest or power, but through wisdom and compassion. Sejong understood the struggles of his people, many of whom could not read or write. For the Chinese characters used in official life were complex and difficult. Determined to give his subjects a voice of their own, he oversaw the creation of a new alphabet, Hangul. In 1443, the script was unveiled, simple yet profound, its shapes inspired by the position of the tongue and mouth. It was a gift of literacy, a bridge between ruler and ruled, a language of the heart. Though opposed at first by conservative scholars who clung to Chinese characters, Hangul endured. It was whispered in poetry, sung in songs, carved into woodblocks for commoners to learn. Today, it is celebrated as one of the most logical and elegant alphabets in the world. And all of it came from Sejong's vision of a people united not just by land, but by words. King Sejong's court was alive with invention. Astronomers mapped the stars, creating celestial globes that reflected the heavens above. Scientists crafted water clocks, sundials, and rain gauges, the first of their kind in the world. Farmers received guides for better harvests, ensuring fields of rice and millet thrived. Even music was nurtured with new instruments designed to capture the harmonies of the Korean spirit. It was as though the Hosan court became a garden of knowledge, each branch flowering with discovery, each petal carrying the fragrance of wisdom. Yet not all was peaceful. The dynasty faced trials that tested its strength. In the late 16th century, a storm swept in from across the sea, the Japanese invasions known as the Injin War. 1592 to 1598. Samurai armies landed upon the peninsula. Cities burned, temples collapsed, and people fled in fear. It seemed Hosan might fall. But from this darkness emerged a hero, Admiral Yi Sun-sin. With unmatched brilliance, he commanded the navy, constructing vessels known as turtle ships, covered in iron plating, their decks bristling with cannons. In battle, they cut through enemy fleets like shadows on water. Yi Sun-sin's strategies saved the nation, his calm courage immortalized in countless tales. Though he fell in combat in 1598, his legacy endures as one of Korea's greatest defenders, a guardian whose spirit still seems to linger on the waves. After the invasions, Hosung rebuilt, though scars remained. The 17th century brought further trials with Manchu invasions, forcing the dynasty to bow temporarily to foreign powers. Yet, within the palaces and villages, daily life continued. Families gathered around hearths. Women wove silk and cotton. Farmers tilled the fields in the rhythm of seasons. Scholars debated philosophy in quiet halls, their ink brushes moving steadily across scrolls of rice paper. Society remained bound by Confucian ideals, strict yet stable, formal yet enduring. Ancestor worship was practiced with reverence, families tending to tombs, offering food and drink to those who had come before. Rituals marked the year, Lunar New Year's bows of respect, Chuseok's autumn harvest feasts, weddings adorned with vibrant robes, funerals accompanied by chants and solemn processions. These customs, carefully nurtured, created a continuity that carried Korea's identity forward even amid upheaval. And within the dynasty's rhythms, folk tales were told, stories of tigers and goblins, clever tricksters and wise old sages, tales whispered by firelight that wove laughter and caution into the fabric of life. As the candle burns low in our imagined chamber, we pause now within the world of early Hos, its palaces shining, its alphabet born, its scholars debating, its heroes defending, its families gathered in quiet rituals. Ahead lies the later centuries of Hosang, where cracks will widen, where foreign ships will arrive at Korea's shores, and where the hermit kingdom will face the encroaching modern world. For now, let the hum of Hosein's early brilliance linger in your thoughts, soft as brushstrokes on parchment. By the 17th and 18th centuries, Hosen had weathered invasion, famine, and political turbulence. The memory of Admiral Yi Sun-sin's victories lingered as a source of pride. But the scars of war remained etched upon the land. Rebuilding was slow, and the economy strained under the weight of taxation and corruption. The Yangban elite Confucian scholaristocrat tightened their hold on society, often focusing more on preserving their privileges than on nurturing the well-being of the common people. Confucian hierarchy had grown rigid. The Yangban class studied tirelessly for the civil service exams, writing endless scrolls of classical Chinese, debating philosophy, and guarding their status. Farmers, who formed the backbone of the land, bore heavy burdens, their harvests sustaining the state while their lives remained humble. Merchants, though increasingly important in trade, were ranked low in status, their wealth not always matched with respect. And below all, bonded laborers and slaves carried the weight of survival. Their stories seldom recorded, but deeply felt. And yet, within this rigid framework, life still bloomed. Markets bustled with chatter, vendors selling rice cakes, pottery, and cloth dyed in indigo and safflower red. Villages gathered for festivals where tightrope walkers balanced high above crowds. Drums thundered and masked dancers told satirical tales of corrupt officials and foolish nobles. These performances, known as talcum, carried both laughter and hidden resistance, voices of the common people wrapped in rhythm and dance. The Ho-song court itself was a place of both brilliance and peril. Kings held supreme authority. But factions within the scholar-official class often split the government into bitter rivalries. These disputes, sometimes over interpretation of Confucian rituals or succession to the throne, weakened the unity of the state. Intrigue filled the palaces with queens, consorts, and ministers vying for influence. Behind the serene facades of tiled rooftops, whispers of betrayal and ambition echoed through the corridors. Still, there were kings who sought reform and revival. One of the most beloved in later Hosa was King Zhongzhu, who reigned in the late 18th century. Intelligent and reform-minded, he worked to strengthen royal power against entrenched aristocrats, encouraged scholarship, and dreamed of a fairer society. He established a royal library, gathering books and knowledge, ensuring that learning was not just for the privileged, but could be preserved for the future. Zhongzhou's reign became a flicker of hope, a reminder of the dynasty's earlier brilliance. Meanwhile, beyond the palace walls, the people's culture deepened. Pansoriya form of musical storytelling flourished, where a singer and a drummer together wove epics of love, loyalty, and trickery. the singer's voice rising and breaking with emotion, while the audience clapped and cried along. These tales carried the pulse of the people, bridging sorrow and joy, weaving shared memory into song. Literature too blossomed, sometimes in the scholarly Chinese of the elite, sometimes in the beloved Hangul script, which grew more widely used despite earlier resistance. Novels written in Hangul told stories of commoners, women, and everyday struggles, giving voice to those often unheard. Hangul had begun as Sajang's gift, and now it bloomed fully, becoming not just a tool of literacy, but a vessel of identity. But the world beyond Hosian's shores was shifting rapidly. Western powers, with their ships and muskets, were pressing eastward. Neighboring Japan, after centuries of isolation, was beginning its own path toward modernization. China, long the cultural giant of the region, was weakened by internal troubles and foreign encroachment. Korea, still deeply rooted in its Confucian traditions, stood watchfully apart, earning the nickname the Hermit Kingdom. For a time, this isolation preserved Hosean's customs, shielding it from colonial influence. Foreigners were rarely allowed within its borders. Trade was restricted. Missionaries and envoys found closed gates. But isolation could not hold forever. Ships appeared on the horizon, cannons gleamed, and demands for treaties grew louder. In the 19th century, the Hermit Kingdom would face choices it could no longer postpone. The final centuries of Joseon were marked by both quiet dignity and deep unease. Families still gathered for ancestral rites, bowing before tablets of their forebears, their gestures linking past to present. Farmers still watched the skies for signs of rain, their livelihoods bound to the rhythm of earth. Scholars still dipped brushes into ink, copying ancient classics, debating principles by candlelight. And yet, beneath this steady rhythm, the ground was shifting as the outside world moved closer and closer to Korea's gates. The candle before us flickers lower, shadows stretching long upon the parchment of memory. We linger now at the threshold of change. Hosan, proud and enduring, still holding to its Confucian heart, yet soon to be tested by storms from beyond its shores. Ahead lies the century of foreign intrusion, treaties signed under duress, and a dark chapter of colonization that would leave lasting scars. For now, let the steady hum of late Joseon life remain with you, the masked dancers, the pansori singers, the rustle of silk robes, the quiet strength of families bowing before their ancestors. A kingdom ancient and enduring, standing at the edge of a new and uncertain dawn. The first intrusions came in cautious steps. Western missionaries, merchants, and envoys attempting to make contact. Some brought maps, books, and instruments. Others came with cannons and the demands of empire. Hosung, guided by Confucian scholars, wary of corruption from outside, resisted. In 1866, French warships sailed up the Han River after the execution of Catholic missionaries, only to meet fierce resistance. In 1871, American forces attempted to make their presence known at Ganghwa Island. But again, Hosean's defenders repelled them, determined to keep the gates closed. Yet, even as the dynasty resisted, the world beyond was shifting too swiftly to ignore. Neighboring Japan, once itself a closed society, had entered its Meiji Restoration, rapidly modernizing with Western technology, industry, and military power. Qing China, long the elder brother to Hosean, was weakening under the strain of its own conflicts. Between these giants, Korea stood vulnerable, its centuries of stability now threatened by currents beyond its control. In 1876, after a Japanese show of naval power, Hosung signed the Treaty of Ganghwa. For the first time in centuries, the Hermit Kingdom opened its ports, not by choice, but by pressure. Other treaties followed with Western nations, each chipping away at Korea's isolation, each pulling the peninsula into the wider orbit of global politics. The late 19th century became a time of profound tension. Reformers within Hosei saw the need for changed modern schools, new industries, railways, and laws. They spoke of progress, of saving the kingdom through adaptation. But conservatives clung to tradition, fearing the loss of Confucian order and the destabilization of society. Rebellions flared. In 1894, the Donghak peasant revolution swept through the countryside. The peasants, weary of corruption, heavy taxes, and foreign intrusion, rallied under the banner of a new faith Donghak, or Eastern learning, which blended Confucianism, Buddhism, and native shamanistic beliefs with a call for equality and justice. Tens of thousands rose, demanding a more just society. Their voices thundered across fields and villages, shaking the old order. The Hosean court, unable to quell the uprising, called upon Chinese troops for aid. But Japan, eager to assert dominance, sent its own forces. What began as internal unrest spiraled outward into the First Sino-Japanese War. Japan's swift victory in 1895 shattered centuries of Chinese influence over Korea. For the first time, Korea stood formally independent, but in truth, it had fallen under Japan's shadow. The final years of Joseon unfolded like a fading candle. In 1897, King Gejong, seeking to assert Korea's sovereignty, declared the Korean Empire. Palaces were renovated, symbols of modernity introduced, and reforms attempted. Electric lights flickered in Seoul, trams began to rattle along its streets, and telegraphs carried messages across lines of copper. For a moment, it seemed Korea might step into the modern age on its own terms, but the pressure was relentless. Japan's ambitions grew, and Western powers stood by, calculating their own interests. In 1905, after its victory over Russia in the Russo-Japanese War, Japan established Korea as a protectorate. By 1910, the empire was annexed outright. The Joseon dynasty, which had endured for over 5 centuries, was no more. The peninsula entered one of the darkest chapters in its history, the era of Japanese colonial rule. Under occupation, Korea's culture, language, and traditions were suppressed. The Japanese authorities sought to erase identity, replacing Korean schools with Japanese ones, forcing children to learn in a tongue not their own. Korean names were often changed, land was seized, and resources extracted for Japan's growing empire. The rhythms of daily life, once guided by centuries of Confucian, ritual, and Korean custom, now bent under foreign rule. Yet, even in this darkness, resistance burned quietly. In 1919, the March 1st movement erupted the wave of peaceful demonstrations calling for independence. Across the peninsula, crowds gathered with flags and banners, chanting for freedom. Japanese forces responded with brutal crackdowns, but the spirit of resistance spread, carried abroad by exiles who lobbied the world for Korea's cause. Secret schools continued to teach Hangul. Poets and writers composed works that carried hidden meanings, veiled in metaphor. Farmers whispered stories of defiance. Exiled leaders, like those of the provisional government in Shanghai, worked tirelessly to keep the dream of independence alive. But occupation stretched on for 35 years. Generations grew up under the Japanese flag, their memories marked by hardship. Some Koreans were forced into labor, others conscripted into the Japanese military. Women suffered as comfort women, taken against their will. The scars of this period remain deep, etched into the collective memory of the nation. And yet, resilience endured, even when culture was suppressed. A folk song sung in the quiet of a village, a poem hidden in the margins of a notebook. Korea, though conquered, was never broken. The candle before us flickers faintly now, illuminating the sorrow of a people enduring occupation. The Joseon dynasty has fallen, the hermit kingdom forced into the world, its sovereignty stripped away. Yet, even in the darkest night, embers glow, for ahead lies 1945, when the storm of the Second World War will bring both liberation and division freedom gained, but at a price that would leave the peninsula divided to this very day. Let your breath settle as we rest in this solemn moment, standing between loss and hope, between the end of empire and the uncertain dawn of modern Korea. That change came in August of 1945, when 2 atomic bombs fell upon Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and Japan announced its surrender. After 35 years, the shackles of colonial rule snapped open. In Seoul, crowds poured into the streets, weeping singing and waving the taeguki, the Korean flag long band. For a fleeting moment, it felt as though the nation would finally stand whole and free again. But freedom arrived with division. The Allies, in hastily drawn agreements, split Korea into two zones of occupations Soviet forces in the north, American forces in the south. At the 38th parallel, a line, invisible on the landscape, the peninsula was cut in half. What was meant to be temporary soon hardened into permanence as Cold War tensions froze hope into rivalry. In the South, under American guidance, political factions clashed, some calling for reunification under socialism, others seeking to build a new democracy. The streets of Seoul echoed with protests, with rallies, with the restless uncertainty of a people torn between paths. Eventually, in 1948, the Republic of Korea was declared, with Syngman Rhee as its first president. In the north, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea emerged under Kim Il-sung. One peninsula, two governments, each claiming to be the rightful Korea. The tension was unbearable. Families found themselves split across the border, villages severed from neighbors they had known for centuries. The invisible line became a wound, bleeding mistrust and suspicion. In June of 1950, the wound burst open. North Korean troops surged across the 38th parallel, beginning the Korean War. Seoul fell within days, its streets trembling under the march of foreign boots. Panic swept through the South as millions fled, carrying little more than what they could hold in their arms. The United States and United Nations forces rushed to aid the South, while China intervened for the North. The peninsula became a battlefield for the Cold War, torn apart by forces far greater than itself. The war raged like a storm without end. Cities crumbled, rivers ran red, and mountains echoed with artillery fire. Seoul alone changed hands 4 times, each shift a wave of destruction and displacement. Families scattered, children orphaned, entire villages erased from the map. By 1953, when an armistice was signed, the land lay shattered. No peace treaty was ever declared, only a truce. The peninsula remains divided, the demilitarized zone, or DMZ, a scar across its heart. And yet, from this devastation, seeds of resilience began to take root. The Republic of Korea was left in ruins, its capital shattered, its economy collapsed, its people exhausted. But survival is woven deeply into the fabric of Korean history. Amid hunger and rubble, life slowly returned. Children went back to school in makeshift classrooms. Farmers coaxed crops from the soil. Families rebuilt homes from the ashes of war. The 1950s and 60s were years of struggle. Years when the nation was among the poorest in the world. Foreign aid kept the South afloat, while political instability haunted its government. But beneath this hardship stirred a determination, quiet but unyielding, to rise again. It was under the rule of Park Geun-hye, beginning in 1961, that South Korea began its remarkable transformation. With strict authority and a focus on industrial growth, the nation embarked on what would later be called the miracle on the Han River. Roads stretched across the countryside. Factories buzzed with machinery, and exports began to flow outward: textiles, steel, ships, and eventually electronics. The skyline of Seoul grew taller, bridges arched across the Han River, and the hum of progress filled the air. This rapid modernization came at a cost. Political freedoms were curtailed, dissent suppressed, workers pressed to their limits. Yet the foundation was laid for what South Korea would become: a nation that could not only survive but thrive. Through the 1970s and 80s, the tension between progress and democracy grew sharper. The people of South Korea, proud of their achievements but yearning for freedom, began to demand change. Students gathered in candlelit vigils, workers marched through factory towns, and ordinary citizens raised their voices. In 1980, tragedy struck with the Gwangju uprising, when citizens calling for democracy were met with violence. But the spirit of Gwangju lived on, a flame that refused to die. By 1987, after decades of authoritarian rule, the people's movement succeeded. South Korea embraced democracy, with direct presidential elections restored. The nation, once ruled by dynasties and generals, was now guided by the will of its people. As the candlelight of democracy spread, so too did prosperity. South Korea emerged as one of the world's great economic powers, home to companies whose names became known around the globe: Samsung, Hyundai, LG. The once war-torn capital of Seoul blossomed into a dazzling metropolis, its skyline a forest of steel and glass, its streets alive with neon and the hum of subways. And culture, too, began to flow outward. Korean films, dramas, and music carried the heartbeat of the peninsula to distant shores. The Korean wave, or Hallyu, rolled across continents, bringing with it the rhythms of K-pop, the grace of Korean cinema, the flavors of Korean cuisine. What had once been hidden, isolated, or suppressed, now shone brightly on the world stage. Tonight, as we breathe in the stillness, we rest in the glow of this remarkable journey. From ashes of war to the light of prosperity, from occupation to freedom. South Korea's story is one of resilience that never falters, even when tested by the harshest storms. The peninsula remains divided, the DMZ still a silent reminder of unfinished history. But within South Korea itself, the spirit of its people continues to bloom, creative, determined, unyielding. The 1990s brought rapid change, had transformed into one of the world's most dynamic economies, known as one of the Asian tigers. The air of its cities carried the hum of industry, but also something more: the quiet, steady rhythm of creativity. The world began to know Korean cars, electronics, and ships, each bearing the mark of precision and dedication. But prosperity was not without challenge. In 1997, the Asian financial crisis struck like a cold wind, sweeping away banks, businesses, and savings. Families felt uncertainty once more, and the pride of progress seemed to tremble. Yet, in this moment of difficulty, ordinary Koreans showed a quiet strength. People donated gold jewelry, wedding rings, and family heirlooms to the government to help stabilize the economy. The spirit of community, of sacrifice for the greater good, carried the nation through, and soon recovery followed. As the new millennium dawned, a new chapter began, not just in industry, but in culture. South Korea's Hallyu, or Korean wave, started to ripple outward. In the early 2000s, television dramas like Winter Sonata reached audiences in Japan, China, and beyond, stirring emotions with their tender stories and beautiful settings. K-pop groups, once known mainly within Asia, began to cross oceans, their music spreading like fire through radio waves, television, and later, the internet. At first, it was subtle, like a soft melody drifting through the air. But by the 2010s, the wave had become a tide that touched every corner of the globe. Names like BTS, Blackpink, EXO, and TWICE filled stadiums from Los Angeles to Paris, from São Paulo to Manila. Millions of fans sang in Korean, danced to Korean rhythms, and embraced the culture of a country they might never have visited. Korean films, too, claimed the spotlight, culminating in the historic triumph of Parasite at the Academy Awards in 2020, the first non-English language film to win Best Picture. Technology became another voice of South Korea. The nation, once rebuilding from rubble, now stood at the forefront of the digital age. Seoul grew into one of the most connected cities in the world, where the glow of smartphones illuminated subway rides, and high-speed internet hummed like a constant heartbeat. South Korean companies shaped the way the world communicates, entertains, and innovates. Samsung screens lit up living rooms, Hyundai cars traversed highways, LG appliances filled homes across continents. The nation's transformation seemed almost dreamlike within 2 generations. From hunger and hardship to global leadership in technology and culture. Yet, through all this brightness, shadows remained. The division of the peninsula still lingers. A silence between north and south that hums like a low note beneath the louder melodies of success. Families remain separated, unable to reunite except for rare and fleeting meetings. The DMZ, though peaceful, is a constant reminder of unfinished history. At times, moments of hope flickered, summits, promises, symbolic gestures of unity. Leaders crossed the border hand in hand. Soldiers stepped aside to allow brief reunions. But the dream of true reunification remained suspended, like a lantern in the night sky that drifts but does not land. In daily life, though, South Koreans carry forward with vibrancy and warmth. The bustling markets of Seoul, where the scent of sizzling tteokbokki and fresh kimchi fills the air, mingle with the quiet beauty of ancient palaces, their curved rooftops standing serene against modern skyscrapers. The laughter of students in the chants of football fans in stadiums. The gentle ceremonies of ancestral rites all weave together the fabric of modern South Korea. The world now looks to this peninsula not with pity or dismissal, but with admiration. From global diplomacy to cultural influence, from the sleek architecture of Incheon Airport to the glowing stages of world tours, South Korea has become a bridge between tradition and modernity, between hardship and hope. And so, as we rest here tonight in the calm glow of reflection, the story of South Korea continues. A story not yet finished, but ever unfolding, written by the resilience of its people, their boundless creativity, and their determination to rise again and again, no matter the storm. The hum of the night carries us forward as the heartbeat of this nation, once silent under shadows, now echoes across the world with light and song.